Hey, I'm back. So this is gonna be a bit awkward because this is the first kind of version I record in English where I actually have to talk over what I'm already saying but not being able to say exactly what I'm saying, so it's just looking at me. With the lips that move, but I'm not going to be able to say exactly what I was mentioning in the French version of it, but I'm going to try to do my best to explain as thoroughly without missing on important parts the best as I can. So I thought that the first thing I would want to do when it comes to the flush setting and any types of setting, actually, if I have to do other videos that are a bit technical like that, is to do some drawings to try to explain it as best as I can what we're gonna do. So here, as I'm showing you, the flush setting, also called, I suppose, the gypsy setting, is one of the kind of simplest version of settings you can try to do. That's why, as a self-taught, it was one of the first I tried to do, because it didn't require too many tools, and when you get the technique, it's actually not that complicated. So what we're gonna do is, as you see, we need to do a triangular drill to pierce the metal and shape it in such a way that it looks like a triangle, to be able to make the stone stick in and remain there perpendicularly, well put and well adjusted into the metal sheet that we will be using. So here is on a bigger, if I had zoomed on the first drawing on the top, on the left top part, is what it looks like roughly. More or less, it's a triangular shape with a drill bit. We will go through, cut the metal through one side to the other, and then we will try to shape the metal in a triangular way, and then we will put in and set in the stone, the faceted stone. So this time I tried to take something with a kind of bluish color that would resemble a sapphire or something, to make it more easy to visualize on the screen, because the quality is not amazing. And the round circle, the red circle that you see around, is actually the motion, as I'm showing, that we will be using to actually squish the metal onto the stone, to be able to lock it and put it securely and safely so it won't move. So basically, we're going to be using the little gap between the faceted stone and the metal, the sheet of the metal, the limit, where they're both kind of, stick to one against the other, to be able to squish this part of the metal just on the outskirts of the faceted stone, if I may say so, where we can just nicely push the metal towards the stone, so it will stay in position and hold the stone well tight and for a long time very safely. So obviously, as I'm mentioning there, I will be using scraps of silver because it's easier for me. Here I freaked out because something fell. So I also forgot to take rings I've made with faceted stones, to show you ways that you could use the flush setting in a more kind of arty, more creative way. So I'm gonna get all that, and I'm also gonna use the camera to have a better focus with a better quality image, so you can see. I'm gonna try to do what I can to have a good zoom and a good focus. So I'll be back. Here we are. I've taken, as you can see, the camera to have a better quality, video quality, to be able to show you as good and as precisely as I can what it would look like. Here I'm showing you two rings. This is the first one I've made. So as I was mentioning, I would recommend for those types of works, if you want to get started and don't kind of spend too much on this, what you can do is use pebbles. So for those who are interested, I also made a video about melting pebbles to recycle scraps of silver, because it's a really cheap way to be able to melt silver and be able to use it as a basis to make rings like the ones I'm showing. So both of them have been melted as pebbles, and as the metal was still very, very warm, like reddish warm, and the pebble was formed but not yet quite solidified because of the difference of temperature, that's when I use some piece of charcoal or something of that genre, and I pressed it upon the fusion, like the melting metal that is starting to cool, to be able to press it to make some irregular shapes like that. But that will be perfect for those types of flush settings, because it will allow us to use thick layers of silver, I suppose, handmade, to be able to drill the holes we need to put and set the stones. So this is an example of what I used. The first one was the black one, and I used Swarovski, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Swarovski is not the best. If you want to start getting into this, you have to use the Zircons. Is the best, the cheapest alternative, and the best way to start with this. So here I'm about to be setting 2 millimeters in diameter, 2 millimeters wide, round faceted gemstones that I get from Rio Grande, because they make, from having tried a couple, they make the best stuff, because their stones are actually laser cut. They're not handmade, like hand cut, which means that it's way more precise in the way it's calibrated. And especially if you're starting with this, get good stones that are well calibrated, otherwise you're going to struggle way more. So for a 2 millimeter faceted stone, I will be using a 1.5 millimeter thick sterling silver scrap, like of silver, sheet of silver. And of course, you have to then, it's just an example, I'm giving you this, like I'm giving this as a base, but if you're using stones from different diameter, obviously you'll have to change the measurements. So for a 2 millimeter zircon, we will be using a 1.5 millimeter thick sheet of metal, and the reason why it has to be not less than 1.5 millimeter thick is because if it's too thin, the back of the stone will come out, and this is trouble. Because if you're using it, for instance, as a ring, the other part of the pointy part of the stone will be painful and not nice to wear on the skin. So you need to be very aware of that when you're using your dimensions and the thickness of the sheet you'll be using. So here as an example, I'm just pre-drilling my hole with a punch thingy to be able to make a mark and ease the drilling part. So here, as you see, you don't have to go too deep and be too strong with the hammer, just enough to have the place where you'll be putting the stone, and this will just make your drill bits last longer. And it's just a intermediate process and stage. You don't really have to do it, but I usually do it because it's easier. Here I will be using, because we need to drill obviously the hole, but the reason why I'm drilling it from completely is because we need something to be able to make more light at the bottom, so the light will reflect on the stone better. Because if you think about it, you cannot do it at all times, but I would strongly advise you to do it if you can, because drilling a full hole from one part to the other will allow us to have more reflection, more light, and it will make the stones look brighter and shinier. And when you think about it, if you don't drill from one side to the other and you put the stone, the bottom will be black, or will be really kind of not as luminous as if you made the light enter by both sides. So I will be using 1.3 millimeter in diameter drill bit. This is the best I found, best ratio to use for 2 millimeters stones, faceted stones. So 1.3 millimeter for the drill bit. That's the size of it, the diameter of it. But all the information I'm giving will actually be put in the description below with the links to the products I use. So here, yeah, I think I haven't forgotten to mention everything. This is it. So yeah, we're going to be drilling from one side to the other, and then we will be using the burrs that I will be mentioning later on to be able to do this type of triangular shape we want to be able to make for the stones to fit in perfectly. I don't mention it too, but I always use a spare little piece of wood because I don't like my bench pin to look like a freaking cheese, like a piece of cheese. So I prefer to make it last longer by using a spare piece of wood, pine piece of wood, to be able to protect my bench pin. So here I was facing a little problem. The drill bit for some reason just didn't want to go through and pierce the metal. Oh, I also forgot that before piercing the metal, we would want to anneal the metal to soften it. I've also made a video about that if you're interested, to be able to soften it to make it easier to drill. So here I decided to stop the video and do my little thing and come back when it's done. So what ended up happening is that because my drill bit just was reluctant somehow to pierce, I did the method that I usually do in those cases, which is take a smaller drill bit in diameter. So I used the 1 millimeter wide drill bit, and then I went on to using, when the first kind of pre-hole was made, I then used the wider one, the 1.3 millimeter drill bit, to be able to do what I wanted. It was just an extra step that was necessary this time for me to drill, because my drill bit was a bit old and didn't want to work. So here is the part where we will try to clean up the metal sheet as much as possible, because we want the stone to be well adjusted. And remember, keep in mind that setting stones are usually the thing that we do at, like, the last thing we do on a project, when the project has been polished, and actually you have made the final polish. That's when we come up with the stones to set everything properly, because the main point here is to try to preserve the stone as much as possible, and trying to avoid to polish it with even cotton buff wheels, because it can a bit damage a little bit the shininess and the brightness of the stone. So here I've used the thinner files I have. I used I think they're Swiss made or French made, I don't remember, files, because there's the best. I take the really smooth one, and then I'm going to be using the Burrs, so the Burrs, the round one. I take the round one because for this tutorial I will use the simple method, the most common method I've tried, and I would recommend when we start doing those types of work. The ones I'm showing you right there are conic, kind of cone burrs, and I wanted to make an experiment and try them, but I wouldn't recommend them for beginners, for people that are starting up those types of settings, because it requires some extra kind of practice, and I would really advise you to stick with the usual traditional method, which is the round burrs. So the burr I'm using right there is a 2 millimeter wide burr, so the same diameter as the stone we will be using. I will also be using some wax. Usually I use my other types of wax, the lob cut one, but for those types of work I feel that this type of wax is the best, because it's a bit thicker and it's a bit less somehow effective than the lob cut, which can be too good in a way. And it's really important to be precise when you drill the hole. That's the most important part, because you need to go at the right pace and to go at the right depth, because if you go too deep we'll have a problem and we can screw up at this part. So that's why I use the other wax. Here I'm showing you the zircon that we will be using. It's stimulated, that's how you say, stimulated ruby-like man-made stone I find on Rio Grande, which is a great, like I was saying, that's where you can get good stones that are well calibrated and that are, I believe, laser cut, which is way better for those types of works, because you will be more precise when it comes to the dimensions than the hand cut stones. And what else have I forgotten to mention? No, I think that's it. We're gonna get going with this. So like I was mentioning, if I wasn't lazy and it was a really proper work, I would have pre-polished by now with my polishing pads to be sure that the metal is really ready to be polished for the final polish. So I'll be using the round burr, and the most important part here is to go gradually, especially like I mentioned it, if you're starting and you're not sure about the size you must be using for the stones you will be setting. It's better to go gradually from, for instance, 1.5 millimeter wide for the burrs. Go gradually, start by 1.5 up to 1.90 millimeters, up to 2 millimeters if you're not sure of yourself, to go gradually, but to prevent from actually making a mistake and basically screwing up the work. So it's better to go gradually than straight away to the given final, what you think is the best diameter for the burr when it comes to the burr, because it will spare you some extra work and some extra failing if you go gradually and increase the diameter step by step. So now it's going to be really hard for me to show you and without having my hands in the way, but the most important part right here, the key part, this is the key part of the job. You have to be perpendicular. Like, I mean, you really have to hold the burr as perpendicularly as you possibly can, because if you don't, the stones will not be well adjusted and will not be straight, basically. It will not be really flat on the piece of metal, so it has to be perpendicular. It's really important, and it's also only by practicing that you will know the right depth to drill. So really go slowly. When you start doing this, just go one tiny bit, check out by putting the stone in like I'm about to show you, and see if it fits rather than going too deep and screwing up. Here I'm using my prong pusher prong. I don't remember the accurate term, but the tool I usually use for setting. And I will be putting some, the best way I do it is to put some saliva on my hand, or some water would do, and then use the pusher prong to put some on it, on the tip of it, and then it will actually be sticky enough for us to take the stone and place it. It's a kind of little trick, not very glamorous, but that's how I do it. And here, once again, the most important part of this process, just like for the drilling, it's to be as perpendicular as you possibly can, because if the stone is not well adjusted and well put, we won't be able to set this properly. So the way I did it, I couldn't show you, but was to put it and then move sideways to be able to make the pusher prong glide, slide on the side to prevent it from actually kind of sticking on the stone. Here I'm seeing that I was trying to show you with the reflection of the light that I see that this is not properly set, in the sense that I didn't drill the hole too deep, because it's only by practice that you can see how you do this. But I was seeing that the stone was coming a little bit too high up above the piece of silver, the sheet of silver, and we really want it to be nearly on the same kind of on the same horizon, if I may say so. It has to be really not sticking out of the sheet of metal. So the way to get rid of the stones when you're screwed up, and obviously try to be a bit more kind of gentle than me, but is to use some sort of needle to be able to push it out. So this is what we do if you find that you didn't do it right and you have to do it like me and go a bit deeper and kind of work, you can use the needle to take the stone out without too many problems. So here I've re-drilled a bit deeper because obviously, like I was saying, it was a bit standing out. The stone was sticking out too much compared to the piece of metal, and I wasn't happy with this. But then again, it's your own choice. You have to start learning what is your preference and what you like. So here we go for a second round where I put the stone as perpendicularly as possible, stick it in, move sideways, and then it stays. And then I was really happy this time because it was the perfect ratio for me on how deep the stone was kind of set it in, and that was for me this is for me the right level. So obviously, like I'm mentioning it again, but if you find that you didn't do it right and that the stone is sticking out too much, just use the needle and go over the process again until you get the result that you want. So obviously I didn't mention either, but if you wish to be using for those specific, there are kind of goggles for to help you set, but I don't use this goggles because I never felt I needed to. So I kind of did a mistake, but it turns out to be a good thing because it reminded me to show you that's how well the stone should be put, which means that we haven't set it yet, but if you have done the job properly, the stone will not fall out when you have after you have put it in. So this is the crucial step, because if you do that and you move it around and the stone comes out, you screwed up somewhere, my friend, and I'm sorry to tell you that you'll have to do it again, because there's no way we can diminish the size of a hole we made in the metal. So that's the most important part, and that's the way you know if the size was correct or not. The stone will fall or not, and if it doesn't, you made the job right. So here I'm trying to show you with the reflection of the light once again at what kind of height and I guess what depth the stone should be put in. So I didn't mention it either, but at the point where you put the stone, like I was mentioning earlier, I would have had, if I had done the job properly, my final polish would have been done before I set the stone in, but I didn't do it because I'm lazy. Here we're going to be using the tool that we've made. If you want to know about how to make this setting tool, homemade, really cheap setting tool, I will link the video too in the description box. And we'll be using this because it works for many of the works of the flesh setting works I do. Here we will be doing it the way I do it. Well, yeah, that's the best way I've found to do this, is to go clockwise in a kind of static motions, clockwise, to be able to set the stone like I was showing in the drawing I've made at the beginning. So yeah, we will be using the tool. It is really important too. That's a really crucial part. You have to do this. You have to polish the setting tool, the steel tool. So here I have made some others, various sizes, and it's all from old stuff I've used, and I have different sizes for different types of work. But I mostly use this one because this one is the best size for pretty much everything. But it is super important. You have to polish it with some polishing paste, some rouge or something. I would recommend the Bar, the German brand, because their polishing paste is the best, I find. And you have to pre-polish it and polish it well, because it will impact on the final setting. Because we will be using this basically as a burnisher, so it has to be really high polished to be able to have a high quality result on the stone while we set. So like I was mentioning, we're going clockwise. I prefer to go clockwise somehow. I don't know if it's good to go both ways. I just rather go one way. Here I'm going to show you what I guess intermediate step you can do if you're not really sure about what you're doing. So the way we're going to do this is go clockwise and be as perpendicular as we possibly can onto the stone, on the corner of the stone. But here, to be sure that the stone won't move, and to make it easier for us, we will do the usual thing that we do with with standard settings, which is go on using the four direction kind of law, north, south, east, west, working in parallels if possible. So here I wanted to show you, but my fingers were in the way. So here I'm going to try to show you better. So we just use the corner of the stone really to be guided, but that's where you need to really be have full control over your tool and how to use it, because what we don't want at this stage of the process is to make a wrong move and scratch the metal and then have to go over and waste some time in using some abrasive wheels, the usual polishing wheels, to be able to fix the mess. So the more kind of efficient you are and the more precise you are when it comes to setting, the less extra work we will have. So here it might not seem like it, but I'm really pushing really hard for it to really stay into place. And then when we have done the fourth direction, we can start with the going clockwise on a kind of perpendicular in a perpendicular motion, and here I couldn't show you. I don't have Parkinson's disease, but as you can see, you really have to push. That's when you have to really be strong and really put a lot of pressure on the metal for the metal to start to be pushed up onto the stone on the corners to really secure the work. This is the most important part when it comes to making the work really secure and making the stone making the complete work really sturdy, and that will stand the test of time in a way. So then when it's done, the first is the hardest, the first round is the hardest, and then it gets better. And here I knew that it was going well because the stone didn't move, the metal was falling, kind of kissing the stone nicely, gently, so I knew that I had done the job correct. And this is not a kind of, always win-win thing. You can screw up, especially when you begin a lot at this stage or even before when it comes to drilling. So don't be overwhelmed if you start and you do a mess or pretty mediocre settings. You will only improve as you do it. And even me, after doing it for years, I still have times where I screw it up. So it's okay to screw up. It's okay to fail. Just practice. So here we go. That's what it should look like when it's done. You can see on the on the outskirt of the, I don't know how you say, but you mean on the outside part of the stone, we can slightly see this round mark we've made, and that's exactly what we want, because this shows that the setting is safe and has been correctly made. And it was really hard to show you also the depth on which the stone should be. It really has to be really a little under the surface of the sheet metal of the metal. It's really tiny. It's really hard to show you, but it doesn't stick out. It's a little bit in, but not too much stuck inside. The depth is not too big. The best way to know if you've done the work correctly is to use the needle point again, and if you push, the stone shouldn't come out. And you can really, like here, I knew that it was really well set because I pushed hard and it didn't come out. But if you want to see if the job has been well made, use the needle the other way around and push it. And if the stone comes out, you haven't set properly. So here with the reflection, we can see that. Use it a lot if you need it, and especially if you don't have, like me, the special goggles that will amplify kind of, the vision. Use the faceted kind of part to see if it's well put. So here I'm back. I decided to use the daylight instead of my lamp to try to have a better ending. So the ruby is the one that we set it on screen. The simulated emerald is the one I used using the other method I was talking about at the beginning, using the conic burr. I didn't like it. I wouldn't recommend it. I would, especially if you're beginning with the settings, I would highly recommend you to use the traditional method, which is using a drill bit and then using the round burr. But the conic, like I'm showing you on the screen, this one was not, it didn't work. I didn't like it. I wouldn't use it again. Those burrs are the specific ones that have a 90-degree angle cut when it's a kind of the point tip and the upper part. When you look at them, actually they're making a 90-degree angle, and I didn't like it. I thought those would be better for this types of setting because obviously they have the shape of the faceted stone, but I didn't like it. But I know that there are others that are similar to this, only that the top is not cut on a 90-degree angle, but are actually just wide, the same width everywhere. So I will try to test other method with other sorts of burrs, and if I find something that that is more efficient and more simple than the usual round burrs, I will probably mention it and talk about it in other videos, in another video. But for the now, yeah, I wouldn't recommend those ones, and I would recommend you to stick on the usual traditional, in a way, method for doing this. So this is the other part. So like I was saying, it's actually doesn't show too much. It's pretty discreet, but it's important to make those holes because the light will shine and the stones will be way more put into light, in a way, enhanced. Their beauty will be enhanced if you do drill a hole at the bottom on the other side. So yeah, I guess I've said all I kind of know so far about flush settings. There will probably be others video coming up about perhaps other techniques if I try to start getting into other techniques, but quite frankly, this is the only one that I've really tried and worked on because it seemed more approachable than the others. I will also put in the link below a book, a great book I also studied, in a way, to learn more about setting. It's about Anastasia Young. And I have the French version of the book, but I think she's from the UK, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am. And but yeah, I will put the link to her book because her book was a great book. That it was really easy and simple to understand, and it will teach you all the bases you need to know, and even further if you want to go for more complicated settings. And when it comes to all the information I'm giving about the drill bits, I talk in millimeters, so it might not really appeal to people that with the US metric system, but that's easier for me, and I think even the drill bits are in millimeters, so all the information you need about that will be put in the description box below too. So I hope this video was helpful. I think I've mentioned everything I had to, and I don't know what the next subject, like the next video, will be about, but for the now, this is what it looks like, and I'll see you around for another video. Oh, and before I end it, I also wanted to show you how I organize my burrs, because I like to be organized, because I don't like to look for things for hours, so I'd rather be super organized. So I found this box on Rio, and here you can see I've labeled all the burrs and drill bits with their diameter to be able to easily make my work, and I prefer to keep it neat and tidy like that because it's easier and you gain some time. So here we go, that's where I put all my stuff because it's really a useful little box. I bought it on Rio, I think. So yeah, I'm really calling it this time. This is it. This is the end. So I'll be back for another video. I don't know when, but I hope this was helpful, and I'm wishing you a great day. Bye bye.